A reading from the book of Proverbs. A perfect wife, who can find her? She is far beyond the price of pearls. Her husband's heart has confidence in her. From her he will derive no little profit. Advantage, not hurt, she will bring him all the days of her life. She is always busy with wool and with flax. She does her work with eager hands. She sets her hands to the distaff. Her fingers grasp the spindle. She holds out her hand to the poor. She opens her arms to the needy. Charm is deceitful and beauty empty. The woman who is wise is the one to praise. Give her a share in what her hands have worked for, and let her works tell her praises at the city gates. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Oh, blessed are those who fear the Lord and walk in his ways. Oh, blessed are those who fear the Lord and walk in his ways. Oh, blessed are those who fear the Lord and walk in his ways. By the labor of your hands you shall eat. You will be happy and prosper. Oh, blessed are those who fear the Lord and walk in his ways. Oh, blessed are those who fear the Lord and walk in his ways. Your wife like a fruitful vine in the heart of your house. Your children like shoots of the olive around your table. Oh, blessed are those who fear the Lord and walk in his ways. Oh, blessed are those who fear the Lord and walk in his ways. Indeed, thou shalt be blessed, all those who fear the Lord. May the Lord bless you from Zion all the days of your life. Oh, blessed are those who fear the Lord and walk in his ways. Oh, blessed are those who fear the Lord and walk in his ways.
A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Thessalonians. You will not be expecting us to write anything to you, brothers, about times and seasons, since you know very well that the day of the Lord is going to come like a thief in the night. It is when people are saying, "How quiet and peaceful it is," that the worst suddenly happens, as suddenly as labor pains come on a pregnant woman. And there will be no way for anybody to evade it. But it is not as if you live in the dark, my brothers, for that day to overtake you like a thief. No, you are all sons of light and sons of the day. We do not belong to the night or to darkness. So we should not go on sleeping as everyone else does, but stay wide awake and sober. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
with me as I make mine in you, says the Lord. Whoever remains in me, with me in him, bears fruit in plenty. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus spoke this parable to his disciples. The kingdom of heaven is like a man on his way abroad who summoned his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to a third 1, each in proportion to his ability. Then he set out. To the man who'd received the 5 talents promptly went and traded with them and made 5 more. The man who'd received 2 made 2 more in the same way. But the man who'd received 1 went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, a long time after, the master of those servants came back and went through his accounts with them. The man who'd received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more. Sir, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. Here are 5 more that I've made. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You've shown you can be faithful in small things. I will trust you with greater. Come and join in your master's happiness. Next, the man with the 2 talents came forward. Sir, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. Here are 2 more that I have made. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You've shown you can be faithful in small things. I will trust you with greater. Come and join in your master's happiness. Last came forward the man who had the 1 talent. Sir, he said, I'd heard you were a hard man, reaping where you've not sown and gathering where you've not scattered. So I was afraid, and I went off, and I hid your talent in the ground. Here it is, it was yours, you have it back. But his master answered him, you wicked and lazy servant, so you knew that I reap where I've not sown and gather where I've not scattered. Well then, you should have deposited my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have recovered my capital with interest. So now, take the talent from him and give it to the man who has the 5 talents. For to everyone who has will be given more, and he will have more than enough. But from the man who has not, even what he has will be taken away. As for this good-for-nothing servant, throw him out into the dark, where there will be weeping and grinding of teeth. The Gospel of the Lord. I was looking back over homilies that I've given on this Gospel, on these readings in the past. I noticed from my notes I've never preached on that first reading, a perfect wife. I may have been nervous, normally having wives, husbands here in front of me, and therefore sort of ducked slightly. Maybe it's the fact that I have the church to myself that has emboldened me to think that this would be the evening when I might refer to that text. What I've noticed looking back is there is something of a repeating pattern about the parable. 3 years ago, I referred to the fact that there was the credit crunch going on and that finances were in a struggle. This morning, we heard the news that the economy is again struggling. And it's in that context that we hear the words of the master to the lazy servant. You should have deposited my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have recovered my capital with interest. You wonder whether that's such good advice, whether not burying it from that point of view isn't a good economic policy. And I've heard this parable used in a number of ways. I've heard it used in school assemblies and as an encouragement to youngsters to use their talents. Though, of course, it isn't talents in that sense. I've heard a very good homily urging people to give generously to the collection. But the context of the gospel today is a liturgical one. I think it must be read in that context because it comes as we approach the end of the church's year, and it therefore focuses the attention on the return of the Master. This indeed is the last parable of the Lord's ministry, beginning with the reference to the kingdom of heaven. In that letter to the Thessalonians, from which we've just heard a passage, St. Paul reminds the community, you know very well that the day of the Lord is going to come like a thief in the night, and he urges them to prepare. The master in the gospel has given each of the servants talents. The talent, as you may know, an ancient Roman coin of great value. Some estimate its value such that the servants have been given a lifetime's salary. In one sense, they need never work again. And the master is slow to return. He has given them plenty of time to prepare and to prove themselves. He will want to know how the servant has spent his life. And when he returns, one of them has simply buried the talent. It was a common means of security. You would bury your coin deeper than the plough could reach, confident that it would remain there undisturbed. His mistaken attitude is that of fear. He fears his master. He fears his return. He hides the coin and he does not produce any fruit. But even then, we don't hear an apology. We hear rather an excuse, even an accusation. I'd heard you were a hard man, reaping where you've not sown and gathering where you've not scattered. Seems a very modern response to want to blame others for the situation perhaps that we find ourselves in. Numerous adverts on television remind us that if something happens to us at work or at home, well, someone else must be to blame. Doubtless, that would have been music to the lazy servant's ears. But the master insists that he takes responsibility for his choices and for his way of life. The lazy servant contrasts powerfully, and this is where we come to that first reading, powerfully with the woman in the first reading. She does her work with eager hands. She sets her hands to the distaff, her fingers grasp the spindle. She holds out her hand to the poor. She opens her arms to the needy. It's an appropriate text, it seems to me, to reflect on in the current context of the church. It is St. Paul who reminds us that the church is the bride of Christ. Those words of the first reading remind us of how we should live. Called to work with eager hands, to hold out a hand to the poor, to open our arms to the needy. And as we compare this call to the report published this week, we realize the need for those words of St. Paul to be heard. They take on a new power in this context. It's not as if you live in the dark, my brothers, for that day to overtake you like a thief. No, you're all sons of light and sons of the day. We do not belong to the night or to darkness, so we should not go on sleeping as everyone else does, but stay wide awake and sober. It's time for me, my brother priests, to hear those words again. That we are called to be sons of light and sons of the day, as indeed we are all called.